Okay, so in pediatrics, we'll be starting with milestones, and the most important question would be on the social milestones. And a child smiles, enjoys his mirror image at around 6 months. So remember, he enjoys his mirror image at 6 months. So he smiles at his mirror image. They may ask you about the social smile. So remember, social smile is at 2 months of life, and then a child recognizes his mother at 3 months. So at 3 months of life, a child recognizes his mother. He recognizes his mother at 3 months. Now the next question which they asked, which was in fact has already been asked in your All India PG exam last year, that CFTR gene is on which chromosome? It's on 7q. So remember, the CFTR gene is on 7q. This came in your last All India exam also. And cystic fibrosis is in fact the most common cause. It's the most common lethal genetic disorder in Caucasians. So remember, it is a lethal genetic disorder in Caucasians. And this gene, it codes for a cyclic AMP regulated chloride channel. It's an active chloride channel. It's a cyclic AMP regulated chloride channel. And remember that almost more than 70% of Caucasians have delta F508. So the most common mutation in cystic fibrosis is delta F508, deletion of the phenylalanine at the 508 number position. This is the most common mutation in these children. Now the next question was on the gain of weight in a preschool normal child. So remember that the gain of at least 2 to 2.5 kg. So we are talking about preschool children. So in preschool children, they gain at least 2 to 2.5 kg per year before school, or at least 7 to 8 centimeters in height per year before they reach school. This is during the preschool years. The next question was on failure to pass meconium, and the most important cause in this child in which there is no external obvious anomaly. You'll think about Hirschsprung. So you think about congenital Hirschsprung disease, which is a motor disorder of the gut because of the failure of the neural crest cells to migrate during the intestinal development. And remember, in fact, in your last AIMS exam, they asked if a baby has not passed meconium, what would be your first test? You'll get a lower GI series, okay, or a lower GI enema, because the lower GI enema can help you diagnose Hirschsprung, and it can also even exclude, it can even treat meconium ileus. So it is helpful in both. The next question is on infections, and remember that in diphtheria, the most common cause of death is myocarditis. It's myocarditis because of obstruction of the airway in the bull neck. So either it can be obstruction or it can be myocarditis. So myocarditis is more important in these patients. Now, what are the features of tricuspid atresia except? So of course, right ventricular hypoplasia is seen. So if I make a diagram of tricuspid atresia here, this is tricuspid atresia, the left ventricle, the right ventricle, and it's like this. It's tricuspid atresia. So this child can only survive if he has both ASD and a VSD. So he can only survive if he has both ASD and a VSD. So yeah, so left side is working mode, right ventricle is hypoplastic, there is pulmonary oligemia. But remember that the second heart sound will be single here. It is like pulmonary stenosis. So in fact, you will just hear a single second heart sound. So this statement is wrong. So remember, tricuspid atresia is an example of a patient who is cyanosed and who has left ventricular hypertrophy and left axis deviation with a single second heart sound. So this is very important in a cyanotic child. And these patients do respond to prostaglandins. So they do respond to prostaglandins. Okay. So coming to the next question, and the next question is on rheumatic fever, which is the earliest valvular lesion. Of course, it is a mitral regurgitation. So remember, the most common lesion in acute rheumatic fever is mitral regurgitation. And if they ask you about rheumatic heart disease, you will say mitral stenosis. And you should all read about the new guidelines, the new Jones criteria, which have come up in 2015 on rheumatic fever, which we have studied in classes. Now, what is the drug of choice for infantile spasms? So whether it's OPGree textbook or it is Nelson's textbook, the drug of choice is ACTH, because it inhibits the CRH hormone. So it inhibits the CRH hormone. So ACTH is the drug of choice. Remember, only for children with tuberous sclerosis, the drug of choice is vigabatrin. Otherwise, ACTH is the drug of choice. Okay, so if they ask you what is the drug of choice for tuberous sclerosis patients with infantile spasms, you will say vigabatrin. EEG is very classic. It's called Hips arrhythmia. Hips arrhythmia is a chaos. It's a chaotic pattern of high voltage slow waves. It's a chaotic pattern of high voltage slow waves. Infantile spasms are also called Salam seizures, or they are also called West syndrome. They can be of two types. They can be idiopathic, when we call it as cryptogenic, or they can also be secondary to multiple disorders. They can be secondary to HIE. They can be secondary to tuberous sclerosis patients. They can be secondary to some structural malformations of the brain. So remember, cryptogenic or idiopathic has the best prognosis. So cryptogenic has the best prognosis. Coming to what are the causes of neonatal sepsis everywhere. So of course, group B streptococci don't cause sepsis in the newborn. In fact, in India, there was a very big study done, and according to the AIMS NICU protocol, so if you ever get time on the Google, just check the AIMS NICU protocols. The most common organism was Klebsiella, followed by Staph aureus. Okay, so this is followed by Staph aureus. So if they ask you, it will be in this order only. In India, the most common causes of sepsis in newborns is Klebsiella, followed by Staph aureus, followed by E. coli. Okay, so group B streptococci usually cause meningitis in the world, not in our country. In our country, whether it's pneumonia in newborns, whether it's sepsis, meningitis, your answer will be in this order only. Now, the next question is on neonatal seizures. So first of all, I would tell you about that what is the most common cause. So remember, the most common cause of neonatal seizure, almost 10% of them are caused by HIE. Now what is the most common type? The most common type of seizure in a newborn is subtle, which means that, you know, just if a newborn is just looking at you and he's just giving you a blank stare, then you think about a seizure, because their arborization of the neurons in the brain is not complete. And the drug of choice in newborns for seizure is phenobarbital. So drug of choice for seizure in a newborn is phenobarbital. Now if they ask you what is the radiological investigation, you can say a transcranial ultrasound to look for the intraventricular hemorrhage. So you can, this is the only investigation which you can do immediately to rule out an intracranial hemorrhage, a transpontaneal ultrasound, which is especially common in especially babies less than 1500 grams or babies less than 32 weeks of gestation. Now the next question is on genetics, that if one parent is normal and the other parent is carrier, and if the child is still having the disease, how can you explain that? So you can only explain this by, and it is a very common question asked in the AIMS PG exams and even to AIMS PGs, it is uniparental disomy. So you get both abnormal alleles from a single parent, and you should remember that uniparental disomy accounts for almost 5% of Angelman syndrome and 30% of Prader-Willi syndrome occur because of uniparental disomy. 5% of Angelman and 30% of Prader-Willi syndrome. And remember, Angelman is because of unipaternal disomy, and Prader-Willi is because of unimaternal disomy of the chromosome number 15. So here the important chromosome is chromosome number 15. There's a deletion, 15q, 11 to 13 deletion. So if you have an abnormal allele, so remember, Angelman, 5% is because of uniparental disomy and 30% is because of unimaternal disomy. Again, the next question is on meningitis in a newborn. And remember, all of these, the rest three do not cause anything in a newborn. So by exclusion, the answer here is Listeria. So it is only by exclusion. But remember, again I would highlight that the most common cause of neonatal meningitis in India would be Klebsiella followed by E. coli. Would be Klebsiella followed by E. coli. And again, remember, Listeria is a very important cause, though it is not the most common cause. And all over the world, group B and D streptococci would be common, followed by E. coli. So these are the causes of neonatal meningitis in India or the world. Okay. Now, a child who has short stature, pulmonary stenosis. So remember, pulmonary stenosis is classic of Noonan syndrome. So it's classic of Noonan syndrome. So I would not call it as like a male Turner's. I would say this child, Noonan syndrome, is autosomal dominant. It's autosomal dominant. This child looks like Turner's. So the phenotype is Turner's phenotype. Okay, so the phenotype is Turner's phenotype, but the karyotype is normal. So it equally occurs in XX and XY. And the most common heart abnormality in Noonan syndrome is a valvular pulmonary stenosis. Remember, they have a valvular pulmonary stenosis followed by hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy and atrial septal defect. So hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy and atrial septal defect. Remember, girls with Noonans do not have infertility. They just have delayed puberty. This was asked in All India PG 2003. So girls do not have infertility. In fact, they have delayed puberty. On the other hand, boys with Noonan syndrome have undescended testes, like this question had, cryptorchidism. So cryptorchidism is seen in boys with Noonan syndrome. Okay, so remember, these boys are infertile because of cryptorchidism. Coming to the next question, which is on the how do we look for the response? And of course, the earliest response is reticulocytosis. When you give iron to a patient, the earliest would be the earliest biochemical response or your pathological response would be reticulocytosis. So if we look at the order of response, the order of the response, within 24 hours, the appetite improves. So within 24 hours, the appetite will improve. Then you can see within 48 hours, you can see the improvement in the bone marrow. So if you do a repeat bone marrow, you will look at the improvement in the bone marrow. And by within 2 to 3 days, you will have reticulocytosis. So increase in the reticulocyte count is seen within the first 2 to 3 days of life. Now the next question is on hemorrhagic disease of the newborn. So late hemorrhagic disease, but before that you should know that early hemorrhagic disease, which occurs within the first 24 hours of life, is usually because of some maternal drugs. So early is usually because of maternal drugs, like maternal so early is because of maternal, say rifampicin, maternal warfarin, these kind of drugs. Now late hemorrhagic disease is usually because of deficiency of vitamin K. So it can occur in children with biliary atresia. It occurs late. So it is not related to this. This first statement is wrong. So it occurs at 4 to 12 weeks of life. It can be severe, and vitamin K may help in these patients. Okay. So remember that in fact these complications are common more in breastfed babies as compared to formula fed babies. So late hemorrhagic disease is in fact more common in breastfed babies as compared to the other babies. Now, if a patient comes to you who is breathless, gasping, so your first, what we will do here would be immediately you should intubate this child, or you start him on bag and mask ventilation. So I would say you start him on bag and mask ventilation because he's gasping. So because he's gasping, you start him on bag and mask ventilation. Okay, so because he's gasping. If he was not gasping, of course I would have started him on 100% oxygen and started him on salbutamol nebulization. So otherwise the treatment of an acute severe asthma, like I told you, would be giving 100% oxygen to give intravenous hydrocortisone and nebulization with salbutamol. Okay. The next question is on breath holding spells. Now what is not true? Now breath holding spells, of course you do not need anti-epileptic therapy, but they may be cyanotic spells, so they may suddenly become cyanosed and this child stops breathing. Atropine can be used in rarely refractory cases. You may use atropine in these patients. It's common between 6 months to 5 years. So this is a typical breath holding spell, and you need to counsel this child, and you may just need to do some behavioral therapy. They do not need long-term any anti-epileptic therapy for these patients. Now all of the following are criteria for attention deficit hyperactive disorder except. So long-term memory loss is not a part of this. So according to the DSM criteria, the most important clinical features are inattention, developmentally inappropriate activity levels, so they are very hyperactive, and long-term memory loss is not seen with ADHD. Now the next question on a webbing of neck, increased carrying angle, a low posterior hairline. These are all features of Turner syndrome. So in Turner syndrome, you have webbed neck, carrying angle, streak ovaries. And remember, since now we talked about the Noonan syndrome, now remember the most common heart disease in Turner's is actually would be a bicuspid aortic valve. So almost half to 1/3 of Turner's have a bicuspid aortic valve without stenosis. And then after that, 20% of Turner's have coarctation of aorta. So 20% of Turner's have a coarctation of aorta, which is mostly post-ductal. So these girls can be hypertensive later in life. The next question is a spotter. Increased nuchal fold thickness on an antenatal ultrasound is classic of a Down syndrome. So it is a Down syndrome screen, trisomy 21. If you see it on an antenatal ultrasound in the first trimester in the mother. So if you have doubts, you can email me or you can tag me on Facebook. I am Dr. Siddharth Sethi. So on Facebook, you can tag me on pediatric.nephrology